I was reviewing the final slides for a client presentation when my brother walked into my office like he owned the place. He didn't knock. He never did. I looked up from my laptop and for a second I genuinely thought I was imagining things. I hadn't seen him in 4 years. Not since his Thanksgiving when my father told me in front of the whole family that my career choice was embarrassing and that I should stop playing architect and find something more stable, something a man could respect. My brother had laughed. My mother had said nothing. I had set my fork down, excused myself from the table, and driven the 3 hours back to Chicago alone. That was the last time I sat at their table. Now here was my brother, standing in the middle of the firm I had built from nothing, wearing a suit that probably cost him more than he made in a month, with my mother right behind him. My assistant had tried to stop them. I could tell from the look on her face when she appeared in the doorway behind them, that wide-eyed, apologetic expression that meant she had done her best and it wasn't enough. "It's fine," I told her. "Please close the door." She hesitated, then did. I folded my hands on my desk and looked at my brother. At my mother. At the manila folder my brother was already sliding across the mahogany surface toward me like we were in some kind of negotiation scene from a movie he'd rehearsed in his head. "Elise," my mother said. My full name, not Eli, the way she used to call me when I was 7 and had scraped my knee on the driveway. "Elise." She was reading it off a document. "Mom," I said, "this is a surprise." "We should talk," my brother said. "His name is Wesley. He is 34 years old. He dropped out of architecture school after 1 semester because, in his words, the professors didn't understand his vision. He's been working in our uncle's real estate office ever since, mostly handling paperwork and taking long lunches." I nodded at the folder. "What's that?" He pushed it closer. I didn't touch it. "We've been thinking," he said, "about the firm, about the future. You've done well here, Elise. Nobody's denying that. But you're at a point now where you need someone with real business experience to help you scale. Someone who understands development from the other side." I looked at him. "I want to come on as a managing partner," he said. The room was very quiet. Out the window behind him, I could see the Chicago skyline, the lake flat and grey in the November light. I had chosen this office specifically for that view. I had signed the lease on the space 4 years ago with $17,000 left in my savings account and a single contract for a small dental office renovation in Evanston. I had built this firm project by project, client by client, hiring my first employee when I could barely cover my own salary, staying in the office until midnight more times than I could count. My name was on the door. My name was on every loan I had taken out and paid back. My name was on the award certificate from the Illinois Council on Design that was hanging on the wall directly behind my brother's head, which he had not even glanced at. "Managing partner," I said. 40% equity, Wesley said, "to start." My mother was nodding slowly, the way she did when she had convinced herself something was reasonable. I thought about the last 4 years. I thought about the Christmas I spent alone because I hadn't been invited home. I thought about calling my mother on her birthday and getting voicemail, and then seeing photos on Facebook of the birthday dinner I hadn't been told about. I thought about the time I was hospitalized for a week with pneumonia, and found out later that my father had told the family I was fine and it wasn't serious, and nobody needed to visit. "Wesley," I said, "do you have an architecture license?" He shifted in his chair. "That's not yes or no. I have extensive experience in real estate development. Do you have an Illinois architecture license?" Silence. "You cannot hold a partnership stake in a licensed architecture firm in this state without a professional license," I said. "That's not a preference. That's the law, the Illinois Architecture Practice Act." My mother leaned forward. "Elise, we're not talking about technicalities. I'm not talking about technicality. I'm talking about the law that governs this firm's existence." My brother's jaw tightened. "You always do this. You always make everything into a performance." "I'm sitting at my desk," I said, "in my firm, where you showed up without an appointment. Where your family, you didn't speak to me for 4 years. The words landed and nobody moved. My mother looked to the window. My brother looked at the folder. I kept my eyes on him and waited. "We were disappointed," my mother said finally. "You know that. Your father and I had certain expectations, and when you chose to cut yourself off from us, Mom. I kept my voice very level. I drove home for Thanksgiving. I sat at the table. Dad told me in front of everyone that my career was an embarrassment. Wesley laughed. You didn't say a word. I left. I did not cut myself off. I left because I was not welcome. She pressed her lips together. Now, I said, I have a client presentation in 40 minutes, and I need you to tell me what you actually want, because it isn't a 40% partnership stake and we all know it. My brother picked up the folder, opened it, and placed it back on the desk facing me. It was a proposal, 8 pages, printed and tabbed. Wesley Mitchell, Managing Partner, Elise Harmon Architecture Group. Responsibilities, equity structure, salary draw, $78,000 a year, and a clause that would give him co-signing authority on contracts over $50,000. I read it without touching it. Where did you have this drafted? I asked. Uncle Roy has a business attorney. Uncle Roy's business attorney should have told him this structure is illegal under state licensing law. Can we stop talking about the law for 5 seconds? My brother said, and there was a sharpness in his voice now, the one I remembered from childhood, the one he used when he felt like he was losing an argument and needed to reframe it as my fault. This isn't about the law, this is about family, about what Dad built, what our family name means. Dad didn't build this firm. I built this firm. You built it using connections from this family. From people who knew Dad, I built it with $17,000 and a contract from a dentist in Evanston who I met at a continuing education seminar. She did not know Dad. She knew my portfolio. My mother cleared her throat. Elise, your father isn't well. I looked at her. His back is Mac. He had surgery in August and the recovery has been difficult. He can't work the way he used to. And Wesley has been struggling. The market has been hard and your uncle's office is not what it was. So you came here. You're our daughter. I'm your daughter when you need something. She looked at me, and I saw something in her face that I hadn't expected. Not guilt, exactly. Something more complicated than that. Something that looked like a woman who had told herself a certain story for 4 years and was only now, sitting in this chair, beginning to notice the edges of it. I'm not going to give Wesley 40% of this firm, I said. Or any percent. That's not happening. But I'm going to tell you something else. I stood up and walked to the window. Below us, Michigan Avenue moved in the grey afternoon light. Taxis, pedestrians, a delivery truck double parked outside the building. I knew you were coming, I said. Neither of them spoke. Uncle Roy's attorney called me 3 weeks ago. I turned around. Did you know that? He called to ask me, and I'm quoting, whether I had ever considered bringing a family member in as a partner because he had a client who was thinking about proposing a structure and wanted to know if there was any interest on my end before they moved forward. I paused. He didn't say your name, but he didn't have to. My brother's face went very still. I called my attorney that same afternoon, I said, and my accountant, and I had a meeting with the 2 senior associates here who have been with me since year 1. Because I wanted to make sure that whatever came through that door, this firm was protected. I walked back to the desk. I also had a conversation with my landlord, I said. Mr. Hargrove, you might have been planning to mention him, I wasn't sure. Uncle Roy does know him. They're in the same commercial real estate circles. I thought it was possible someone might suggest that the building lease could become complicated. I looked at my brother. Am I wrong? Wesley said nothing. His expression told me I wasn't wrong. Mr. Hargrove and I have been on excellent terms for 4 years, I said. I've paid my rent on the 1st of the month, every month. I referred 2 other tenants to this building. When I called him 3 weeks ago and explained that I was anticipating some external pressure related to my lease, he told me, and I'm going to remember his exact words for the rest of my life. He said, Elise, anyone who comes to me trying to use this lease as leverage against you is going to have a very bad morning. My mother put her hand over her mouth. He also mentioned, I said, that he had forwarded the initial inquiry he received, which had come through an intermediary, to his attorney to document it, in case it ever became relevant. The room was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system. "Wesley," I said, "I love you. You're my brother. But you have spent your entire adult life waiting for something to be handed to you, and it has not made you happy, and it is not going to start making you happy now. I cannot give you this firm. I would not give you this firm even if I legally could. This firm is mine." He stood up. His chair scraped the floor. "You're unbelievable. I've been told. We came here in good faith. You came here with an 8-page proposal and a plan to threaten my lease. That's not good faith, Wesley. That's a negotiating strategy." My mother was still sitting. She hadn't moved. "Mom," I said, and my voice was quieter now, because I was tired, and because underneath all of it, I was still her daughter, and that still meant something even when I wished it didn't. "Dad needs a good physical therapist and probably a care coordinator. I can send you some names, people who are genuinely good at what they do. If the finances are difficult right now, I'm willing to help with some of that. Not because I owe it, because I choose to." She looked up at me. "But that's the offer," I said. "That's everything that's on the table for me. There's nothing else." She nodded, very slightly. Not agreement exactly, more like acknowledgement. Like she finally understood the size and the shape of where we actually were. Wesley picked up the folder. He didn't say goodbye. He walked out of my office and I heard the elevator at the end of the hall and then nothing. My mother stood up more slowly. She straightened her coat. She looked at the award on the wall behind where she'd been sitting, the one from the Illinois Council on Design. She looked at it for a long moment. "You were always the one who was going to do something," she said. "Not to me exactly, more to the room." "I know," I said. She left. I stood at the window for a while after that, watching Michigan Avenue. A woman walking a dog stopped to look at something on her phone and the dog sat patiently beside her and then they moved on. A bus pulled up and 6 people got off and 8 got on. Then I went back to my desk and opened my laptop and pulled up the client presentation. My first hire at this firm, a structural engineer named Donna who had taken a chance on me when nobody else would, knocked on my door and leaned in. She'd been in the building when they arrived. She had seen their faces in the lobby. "You okay?" she said. "Yes," I said. "Check the load calculations on the 3rd floor cantilever. I want to go over them before we present." She looked at me for a second. "Already done," she said. "They're solid." "I know," I said. "I just like to hear it." She smiled, a small one, and pulled the door mostly closed. I looked at the presentation on my screen. 40 slides for a mixed-use development in the West Loop, a project that was, by any measure, the largest commission my firm had ever landed. 3 years of building relationships with this particular development group. 3 years of showing up, doing the work, being the person who called when she said she'd call and delivered when she said she'd deliver. My father had once told me that a woman building a firm like this was trying to carry something too heavy. He'd said it at Easter in front of my aunt and 2 cousins, and he'd said it the way people say things they believe are helpful. I thought about that sentence sometimes, in the early years, in the bad stretches, when a project fell through or a client went cold, or I had to make payroll by moving money between accounts at 11 o'clock at night. I thought about it, and I made it into something I could use. Every time I delivered a project on time, every time a client called back for a second commission, every time someone I respected told me the work was good. I thought, this is me setting it down. I am not carrying it. I am building with it. The presentation went well. The client had questions about the rooftop terrace and the underground parking structure, both of which we'd anticipated, and by the end of the meeting, they had approved the schematic design phase and authorized us to move forward. After the clients left, Donna poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one, and we stood at the window together looking at the skyline. "The Reed family used to do deals with Hargrove," she said, apropos of nothing. She had been in Chicago real estate circles long enough to know the edges of most stories. "I know," I said. "He likes you. He likes that I don't waste his time." "Same thing," she said. We were quiet for a moment. "The West Loop project," she said. "That's the biggest one we've had." "Yes. Your dad knew about it." I thought about my mother, standing at the wall reading the words on the award certificate. He will, I said. Eventually. Donna nodded and didn't say anything else, which was one of the things I respected most about her. 3 months later, I got a letter. An actual letter, handwritten on plain paper, from my mother. It was 4 sentences long. She said she had been thinking. She said she thought I had built something she didn't have words for. She said she was sorry it had taken her so long to see it. She said she hoped, when I had time, we could get coffee. I read it twice. Then I set it on my desk and looked at it for a while. I didn't call her back that day or the next day. I took the time I needed because I had learned the hard way over a long time that taking the time you need is not cruelty. It is just honesty about where you actually are. But eventually, on a Saturday morning in February, when the lake was frozen at the edges and the city was very quiet, I picked up my phone and I called her. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, Mum," I said, and we talked. Not about Wesley, not about the firm, not about the folder or the proposal or the morning in my office. We talked about small things. A restaurant she'd tried, a book she was reading, the neighbour's dog that kept escaping into her yard. It wasn't everything, it wasn't fixed. It wasn't the kind of ending that wraps up cleanly, because real things don't. But it was a beginning. And I had learned, more than anything else in my life, that a beginning is enough. You build from beginnings. That's what they're for. The Westleap project broke ground in April. My nephews are building permit. My firm's name is on the construction signage on the chain-link fence out front. My brother has not contacted me. Every morning I drive to the office. I park in my spot in the garage, the one with a little sign that says I reserved harem. And I take the elevator up and I look at the lake and I start the day. It is, by any reasonable measure, enough. It is, in fact, more than enough. It is, in fact, more than enough. It is mine. I've thought a lot about what happened in that office. Not the drama of it. Not Wesley's face when I told him I already knew he was coming. Not my mother standing at the wall reading the words of my award like she was seeing them for the first time. I've thought about the years before that day, the long, quiet years when nobody called. Here's what I've come to understand. The way people treat you when you have nothing tells you everything you need to know about why they come back when you have something. Wesley didn't show up with that folder because he suddenly believed in me. He showed up because the firm was real, the address was real, the skyline out my window was real, and for the first time in his life what I had built was impossible to dismiss. That's not love coming back. That's appetite showing up in love's clothing. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I think it's important to see it clearly. When you can name a thing accurately, it loses its power to confuse you. The choices I made in that room came from something I had to build slowly, over years, the same way I built the firm. Not confidence exactly. Confidence can be loud and fragile. It was more like clarity. Clarity about what I'd earned, what I'd sacrificed, what I would and would not accept in exchange for peace. Donna had once told me, early on when we were both working late on a project that barely covered costs, that the most dangerous thing a woman in this industry can do is negotiate against herself before anyone else even sits down. I had carried that with me. When Wesley pushed that folder across my desk, I did not negotiate against myself. I did not soften the edges of the truth to make the room more comfortable. I said what was accurate and I let it stand. There is something I want to say about the offer I made my mother before she left. The care coordinator, the physical therapist, the willingness to help with my father's recovery. Some people, when I've told this story, have said I was too generous. Maybe, but I don't think generosity and boundaries are opposites. I helped because I chose to, not because I owed it. And that distinction is everything. An action taken from choice feels different inside than an action taken from obligation. One builds you up, the other hollows you out over time. The call I made to my mother in February, on that frozen Saturday morning, that was also a choice. Not a surrender. Not proof that everything was fine. Just a door I decided to open because I was ready to, on my own timeline, without anyone pushing me toward it or pulling me back from it. I think that's the thing ultimately. You don't get to control what people do to you. You don't get to control whether they leave, whether they come back, whether they come back carrying a folder with your name on it and a percentage they've already decided is theirs. What you get to control is what you build in the silence they leave behind and what you're willing to accept when they return. Elise Harmon Architecture Group exists because I use that silence. Every project, every late night, every payroll I nearly couldn't make. That was me answering the silence with something real. Wesley is still out there somewhere, waiting for something to be handed to him. I hope, genuinely, that he finds a way through, but I am not that way. I was never going to be that way. And knowing that, really knowing it, not just saying it, is what let me smile when he pushed that folder across my desk. The West Loop project broke ground in April. My name is on the permit. That's not a metaphor. That's just what happened when I kept going.